The title of today's Hangout is Developing a Target Product Profile Beginning with the End in Mind. This is the Target Product Profile is a critical tool for helping therapeutic product developers guide their activities by beginning with the end in mind, so identifying all the critical properties of the product that are going to inform the overall product development strategy. To participate, listen in, you can click the call-in icon on your screen, or you can call in using your phone to the following toll-free number, and the access code is given. This should also be given in the webinar invitation. Everybody's on mute now as participants. If you have a question, you can enter that question during the event into the chat window on the lower right-hand side of your screen. And you can receive copies of our slides by providing your email address in the feedback form that you'll receive after the presentation. The small business hangouts that our office at the NHLBI organizes are designed to help SBIR and STTR applicants with the non-technical aspects of their business and product development, including regulatory challenges, understanding the market opportunity and competitive space, as well as intellectual property matters. And I'll briefly introduce you to our office later on in the presentation. There are folks here that can help to advise applicants and awardees in all these various areas. And we've archived our previous Hangouts on a YouTube channel, and the address is given here in abbreviated form. So Chris is, as I mentioned, a regulatory specialist here in our office. She has 20 years of research experience, which includes development and optimization of blood and plasma therapeutics, and she has a very deep background in bioassay and screening platform development. She also has 8 years of regulatory experience. She started with a fellowship at the US FDA, where she learned the regulations and how product reviewers think about new technologies as they're being developed. After her fellowship, she joined a contracting company where, as the head of the regulatory affairs and services team, she was responsible for supporting the multiple additional aspects of developing, executing, and maintaining a full spectrum of regulatory communications and documentation for multiple clients. Chris joined the NHLBI 3 years ago and has been working with our biomedical innovators to help them to understand how to identify and comply with US regulatory development requirements for their technologies. She received her PhD in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy and is a certified professional through the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. Today, Chris, as I mentioned, will describe what a target product profile is and how to begin developing one for your therapeutic product using publicly available information.
Let's talk today about the target product profile. The learning objectives for today's session will include understanding what the target product profile is, how it's used, and where to find information to help you start filling one out for your technology. By the end of today's presentation, while you're submitting your final forms, Gary is going to tell you about some of the other resources that the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute has developed or participated in that can add some significant value to your technology development. So I hope that you will stick around to hear that very valuable information, and also that you'll be submitting questions throughout this presentation. Again, you can submit questions in the lower right-hand side of the webinar screen, and we'll stop periodically to take a look and address your questions as they come up. So, why the target product profile? Why would we dedicate an entire webinar to this? The target product profile, or the TPP, is a tool that can be used by companies that are developing a novel therapeutic. Although this particular tool was specifically created to support drug development, the concept of the TPP can be applied just as easily to medical devices and diagnostics. And you'll see how this can happen in just a couple more slides. So the, excuse me. The TPP is a tool. So what does that actually mean? It doesn't mean that it's a hammer, an HPLC, or some sort of computer program, and you can't buy it from Sigma, VWR, or Best Buy. But the TPP is a project management tool. It's similar to a Gantt chart, if you're familiar with that term. It's also a communication tool. You can include it in your submissions to the FDA and other health authorities to ensure that action items and agreements are documented in a standard way. In fact, the target product profile was actually developed with industry and FDA input to ensure that all of the data components that go into a marketing application are addressed during the development life cycle of the therapy. And FDA has issued a draft guidance with a proposed template for the TPP. The draft guidance includes a brief description of what types of information should be put into each section of the TPP. And if you take a look at the bottom of this slide, you'll see that there is a link to the draft guidance document in the footer. But I'm also going to show you in just a couple of minutes how to find that on your own. So the target product profile isn't just a way to talk to the regulatory bodies. It's also, if you think about it effectively, part of your business plan. The target product profile can be used by technology developers to plan out what work needs to be done, when that work needs to be done. It can be used to identify and clarify timeframes for various development activities and associate work with budgets. So once you start to think this way about your technology development, you can really apply the process to all aspects of your development work, not just to the things that you think of as going into your regulatory submissions, such as the chemistry and manufacturing work or the formulation, preclinical and clinical development, but really to a more global strategy in terms of target dates for regulatory submissions to the U.S. and other economic regions for regulatory interactions or filings. You can plan manufacturing expansion to additional facilities or countries, target out your label expansion studies appropriately. By thinking about your product development activities in terms of the target product profile, it's also likely as a small business to help you talk to potential strategic partners or investors, because you'll have already thought through a fuller version of your plan. And starting to think this way as early as possible means that there's less legacy work that you're going to need to integrate into your TPP as you hold those conversations over time. So the target product profile, how do you use it? It really is similar to a Gantt chart in that you put in dependencies and all things of those natures. And the Gantt chart is a pretty good analogy. One activity is likely to require inputs from multiple other activities. Different aspects of your development work may occur in parallel or in sequence. And the target product profile is really a dynamic document. It's not something like the standard business plan where you write it and you put it on a shelf and then in a year or two you look at it again. The target product profile is something that you change each time you come to some value inflection point or go, no-go decision stage gate in your therapeutic development process. It's used to document changes in plans so that if someone new joins the team, you can substantiate why you've gone in one direction versus another. It can be used to document discussions and agreements with various health authorities to identify completed and planned activities, including clinical trials and marketing applications. In fact, a sponsor can repeatedly submit an updated target product profile to the FDA as part of their ongoing discussion in their IND file. And in that document, you would indicate days of formal meetings with the agency or non-formal interactions such as emails or phone conversations with review team members to support the performance or non-performance of specific activities that you may have discussed with these individuals. So now I've been talking about this target product profile and extolling its virtues as a development tool. Let's see what it actually is. If you take a look at the FDA draft guidance, the TPP sections are listed here, and there are 17 of them. It's pretty darn comprehensive. These fields cover a lot of ground. How did these sections get defined? Well, they were defined by being exactly those same pieces of information that go into a product label. So any new drug that submits a new drug application or a biologics license application is going to need to provide this type of information with their labeling. And when you really think about it, your labeling is your product. So this is why the TPP is a development tool that begins with the end in mind. In the beginning, you define your ideal product and you figure out what your desired label claims are. But as we know, drug development is a bit of a snaky path, and you may not always get to where you originally intended to go. So in the end, once you've gotten approval for one or more label claims, you promote, sell, and are reimbursed for your technology based upon your actual label claims. And so all of your product development work in reality should be guided by these labeling and marketing considerations. So given that information, the target product profile, which is a mirror essentially of your label, your product label, is something that conceptually can apply not just to therapeutics, but also to diagnostics and device developers. The actual content that will go into a device or diagnostic product development plan is not going to be nearly as structured or consistent because different devices and different diagnostics have different fields that enter or don't enter into their marketing applications. However, beginning by defining your label and then planning your development work to align with that data package is a strategy that works regardless of the discipline within which the technology development is occurring. So what does a label look like? A lot of people who are sort of mostly consumers of drugs will think of a label as being similar to this. It's got a little piece of paper that's stuck on the outside of a vial or a box, but when you really think about it, this whole 17 pages worth of a product insert is also your product label. And for this particular drug, 17 pages long, in the US, a drug product label defines how you can promote your product. If you're promoting a related use for your drug and that use isn't on the label and therefore substantiated by a clinical data package, you could find yourself in trouble with the FDA. So now we've talked about the label, what it looks like, and that it's used to help you market your new technology. But those 17 fields, that's a lot of information. And so where do you find it? Where do you start? That TPP outline that we saw a few slides ago has 17 different sections, some of which you can't possibly address at this point because your drug hasn't even gotten to the point of human or perhaps even animal testing yet. So you might think to yourself, okay, Chris is saying this is a really great tool, but how can I start using this if I don't have any of this information? So first, you might want to start with a few less sections. And second, you don't need to start with all of the sections filled out. So let's start by recognizing that having a few less sections seems like a lot less work, because 17 sections is a heck of a lot. If you take a look online, just do a simple internet search for target product profile template, you'll see a bunch of them that are available online. Take a look at a bunch of them, at least 3 or 4, see what the options and attributes are of the different templates that are out there, and you might find one that you actually want to use. Or you might find that different features from several are appealing and you want to create your own. Or you could, of course, start with the FDA suggested template and just recognize that certain fields are going to remain empty until you're further progressed in your development work. So the minimal sections that are kind of commonly used in developing a target product profile for early stage developers are the 10 that are listed here. And this is an example that I'm going to use during today's webinar. As you continue in your product development work, you learn more about your technology, you can always add more sections. Just because this is how I developed an example for this webinar does not mean that it's the best way for your specific technology. And I encourage you to always look back to the FDA guidance document and see if there are other sections that you know you'll want to include from the get-go. You are the expert on your innovation. So, first, I need to think about my ideal product profile. Not everything is, can, or should be a once-a-day tablet given to all populations. So as I think about my ideal situation, I really want it to be realistic. I want it to serve my final customer, whether that's the patient or the clinician or the practitioner, the caregiver. I want to think about, is there a reason I need to consider pharmacists or other EMTs or some other specific group? I want to talk to those people and find out what would make my drug attractive to them, encourage compliance with appropriate use, and allow for ease of use in the particular disease state or indication that I am targeting. And this is also a point in my product development where I want to deepen my understanding about what people and patients are currently doing to manage the condition I'm targeting. In order to do this, I want to understand if there are any predicate therapies out there. Now, predicate is a term that's more common to the device and diagnostic field, but the concept of it can apply equally well to therapeutics. And so what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to identify at least one or two similar technologies that I can use to help me build out my target product profile template. So a predicate is some sort of marketed product that bears a resemblance to what you want to develop. Okay? You can and should think somewhat broadly about this if you're developing something that is so completely new and innovative that it's either treating an unmet need, so there's no current standard of care or therapy for it, or is using a new modality or technology or manufacturing process or delivery mechanism for a therapy. And as you think about this, and we'll have an example that we're going to walk through in just a few moments, you want to use the information that you can gather publicly about these products to help you define your target product profile and help you understand the various testing and safety studies that you're going to need to perform in order to get to market. So how do you find these predicates, right? So you do a search. Here at the NIH, we do a lot of research. You're innovators, you're going to do searching. Ways that you can search is you can talk to key opinion leaders, right? Talk to the clinicians, the advocacy groups, patient groups, search the internet, read abstracts and journal articles, search the FDA website. For tips on how to navigate the FDA website, you can go right there to a prior hangout that we held, and there's about a half hour long. Hopefully it's not too much time. Google and Firefox, Internet Explorer, Safari, any of these internet search vehicles are really great places to find brand names. You may also find some links to approval documentation. You never know what you can find when you do a good search, but include not just the electronic world, but actual people in your searching. And then use that information to help you identify the work that lies ahead. So what kinds of information might you be able to find? The company themselves, if there's a specific technology that's a good predicate, the company website or the product label could provide a lot of good information. There may be news coverage or scientific articles and abstracts about similar technologies or technologies that are products that are targeting the same sort of metabolic pathways. You can always find clinical trial information on either clinicaltrials.gov for US-based trials or on the UDRACT website for European trials. You can find redacted product approval information on the FDA website. You can find not just approval documents, but also the summaries or the transcripts, rather, of advisory committee meetings. You may find special notices about a particular drug or drug class. Recall information could help you understand some of the safety or manufacturing concerns that would come up. When you're searching on the FDA website, you often get the best results when you use what are called reading room terms. And the reading room is just where all of the Freedom of Information Act redacted materials are posted on the FDA website. For the Center for Biologics, you want to search by product type. That's sort of the best search term. And for the Center for Drugs, you want to go by either brand name or active ingredient. If you happen to know an application number, you can certainly type that in. But those are sort of the best ways to go ahead and search online. So I just talked about the FDA website, and we're going to go ahead. I'm going to show you the front page of the FDA website. My very favorite absolute feature of this page, and indeed of the FDA website overall, is this search box here in the upper corner, the one that's got that nice big red box around it that I put there. I've tried bookmarking pages on the FDA website, but they constantly update their content, and so I found that just doing a simple search is usually my fastest route to whatever I'm looking for. And also, using the search tool allows the site itself to return a lot more information than I might think I'm looking for. And so some of that other stuff can be really juicy information that I just didn't even know I was interested in, but once I see it, I know and am excited by it. So I mentioned the redacted documentation that's available on the reading rooms. The links are right here on this deck, and they are a really great resource. They're among the few, very few, bookmarks that I have for FDA. And these pages actually rise to the status of having a bookmark in my internet search engine because they are truly an amazing place to find out about predicate technologies. When I'm talking with our innovators here at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute about the FDA path forward for their technologies, I very frequently look to the information in the reading rooms to help inform my conversations before I pick up a phone and talk with them. So what do these look like? For the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, the Freedom of Information Act reading room looks like this. It is Drugs at FDA. And this is where you can find all kinds of product approval information. As you see, you can search by drug name, active ingredient, or application number. You enter at least 3 characters, hit submit, and you get a bunch of returns. Or you can just browse A through Z and 0 through 9, whatever the drug name is. And so this is how one would look for the Center for Drugs. That's the homepage for their reading room. And for the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, the reading room front page looks like this. Except, of course, they're all the same color when you pull it up on your computer. But what kind of information can you actually find by going through here? So for the Center for Biologics reading room, I've gone ahead and highlighted the licensed biological products with supporting documents. And on the next slide, I'll show you where I actually clicked through that link, or in a upcoming slide, I'll show you where I clicked through that link. So in terms of developing your target product profile, I am here at the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and so for today's webinar, I have chosen to use a hemophilia indication, which is a blood disorder. It's a bleeding disorder. And so my target is going to be, my target product will be a therapy for factor IX deficient hemophilia. My target population is going to be all factor IX hemophiliacs. What I'd like to do is I'd like to administer my therapy topically. And so this is going to be a PRN, or as-needed ointment. It'll come at, something, if you think about like the anti-itch hydrocortisone creams, you can get it at 1% or 5%. So it may come in different strengths, but it's going to be an ointment needed, as needed. So let's do some research. Let's figure out if we can find a predicate or two that can help me inform some of these lower fields about the efficacy, the non-clinical toxicology, the safety and side effects, contraindications, drug interactions, or clinical studies that I might need to perform in order to develop my technology. So for predicate number 1, there is already a factor IX infusion, infusible product that is available for this population. Its target population is all factor IX hemophiliacs, regardless of age. But it is delivered by an IV infusion, and it's a weekly infusion that they need to, go and manage their health on a very regular basis. There's another predicate, though, which is for traumatic injury, so it also stops bleeding. It's a clot-enhancing therapy. It is approved in both adults and pediatric indications, but it's a topical administered therapeutic, and it's a as-needed ointment. So you could think of this as being similar to Neosporin, right, or some other sort of antibacterial ointment that you might use on a scrape or a cut. And for me, I'm targeting anyone who has factor IX deficient hemophilia, but my real target, my marketing geniuses in my company, want this to be targeted to the moms of kids with hemophilia. So if you go to the playground and you get a scratch, you don't want to have to rush your kid to the emergency room. You want to be able to put an ointment on them. So that's why the ointment aspect is so important for my product, and why I'm going to pull a second predicate that relates specifically to that. So again, how am I going to find out about all of these lower fields to help me identify the work I need to do? As it turns out, there is, as I mentioned, a recently approved factor IX therapy, but it's delivered by an infusion. So let me, start by looking at this. And in this case, we're going to look at a product called Alprolix. It is a recombinant factor IX replacement therapy. For this particular indication, I already knew that there were a few approved therapies. So as you see here, there are a couple of different factor IX therapies. So I decided to go directly to FDA's approved biologics products database, and I found this. When you look in the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research approved biologics database, you'll see everything's listed alphabetically and by the generic product type, not by trade names. So here I am, and I've gotten to Alprolix, and I want to see what some of that supporting documentation, that approval documentation looks like. How do I get there? Well, I click on the Alprolix hyperlink on the prior page. It brings me to this supporting information documentation page. And if you take a look, here's the application number, right? So I can always use that as a search term in the future, should I so desire. It gives me the package insert, so that should give me a pretty good basis of how this technology got approved through those 17 different fields. You can see I ran this search a couple of months ago, so this the most recent approval letter for this particular product at that time was dated on March 28th, 2014, and there was a summary basis for regulatory action based on that approval letter. However, there's also this wonderful section that says approval history, letters, reviews, and related documents, which provides really in-depth approval information. And because I know that this March 28th letter wasn't the original approval letter, I want to go back into this approval history. So when I click on that, so why is this type of information? What can I learn from these approval history letters and reviews? Why do you want to spend your time looking for it and then actually reading through them? So these documents are part of the dialogue that the FDA had with the sponsor when the drug was approved for market. By reading through them, you can gain an understanding of how FDA is thinking about a particular therapy, whether it's targeting a specific population, an indication, a route of delivery, whichever reason you've got this on your comparative template as you start to develop your target product profile. And there's almost always something to learn about your technology development by reviewing how other companies have gotten their somewhat similar products to market. The more current the documents are, the more relevant the FDA opinions that are expressed in them will be to your technology. Remember, the FDA is evolving in its understanding of risk-benefit also. And so it's not that there's a static bar that is needed for approval of a particular therapy. Also, this type of information is relatively unique to the US. This type of information isn't available worldwide through all of the regulatory health authorities. They don't post these types of documentation. However, in the US, because of the Freedom of Information Act, there is a requirement that these types of documents get posted, and they end up being a really rich resource as you're trying to develop your own technology. That being said, as a sponsor, you can gain insights from those who come before you, and you should take advantage of that, but you also need to be aware that as you get to your approval, your marketing approval for your technology, you're going to have some dialogue back and forth with FDA about what is truly confidential and trade secret information that must be redacted. And so these are redacted documents. They're never posting up the raw submissions. You still get the information about how the reviewers think, how the company presents their products, and what their preclinical and clinical strategy is for each label claim. But you'll find, unfortunately, that some of the juicy stuff really isn't around. So, I'm sorry, on this prior page, if you take a look, you'll see all the different types of review and amendment memos that are in there, and we're just going to start moving forward with one of those, which we're going to start with the Chemistry, Manufacturing, and Controls Analytical Methods Review for Alprolix. So each bulk segment of the marketing submission will receive its own review, its own write-up. It will have its own set of internal reviewers at FDA, and it will have an executive summary immediately below the memo line, where there is a clear statement of the submission status. So for this particular case, based on the totality of this information, I found this BLA to be approvable. You may find that only a certain aspect of a submission is considered approvable and something is not considered approvable. You will never know what isn't approved, because that is still a development activity of the company and that is considered confidential information. But once something is approved or approvable, then that is a document that will get posted. So each subsection of the, not just does each bulk segment receive its own review, but each subsection of that segment will get its own review. So in this case, you'll see that the acid methodology and validation for drug substance is also highlighted. So what I did with this particular review document was I went ahead and I put together the table of contents for it. And so as you take a look, you'll see there's the executive summary, and then there were that assay methodology for the drug substance was actually fully redacted, but the information about the drug product was not. And you can imagine that there's some significant overlap between the two. So the assay methodology and validation for the drug product includes quite a long list of different tests and the information that was submitted to be considered for the approval. Any place that you see this B parenthesis 4 close paren section indicates there's redacted information in the submission. So probably that's the stuff you really, really, really want to know about. You're not going to, but you can find out still quite a bit about the various types of testing that were required to demonstrate the chemistry, manufacturing, and control information for this particular submission. Let's take a look at the Pharm Tox review. So pharmacology, toxicology is a very important aspect. It's one of the things that, it's one of the only ways that FDA has prior to your first human interaction to assess the safety of your particular technology. And so some of these studies will have been done quite early in the development process and can help you identify perhaps what is an appropriate animal model, a species, what sort of sample sizes were included in the evaluation of the different types of non-clinical studies that were performed. And if you take a look here, you'll see that for the primary pharmacodynamics, there were 6 different studies performed. For the efficacy and safety pharmacology, there were 4 different studies performed. So you can start to get an idea of just how many studies you're going to need to perform. And by looking through some of the results from those, you can begin to design your experiment. Now, this is not to say that you're going to be able to completely design your drug development strategy based on something that's already approved, but what this can provide to you is the ability to have an informed discussion with the FDA with a pre-submission meeting, pre-IND meeting, or a pre-IND meeting, where you then have a discussion, an informed discussion with FDA about the testing that you'll need to provide in order to be allowed to proceed with your clinical exploration. So finally, here's the clinical pharmacology review. Now, for the clinical pharmacology, each study is actually going to be summarized independently. So you need at least 2 clinical trials to support a marketing application, but as new claims are added, additional studies are submitted. And so you definitely want to continue reading beyond the original approval documents, because this will help you understand how label claims have been expanded. So we've sort of looked through all of this very dense text for a couple of slides now. How does this relate to your target product profile?
Hey, Chris, I just want to jump in and just remind people that they can submit questions via the chat feature in the lower right-hand corner of their WebEx window. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. And please do. I mean, this is definitely meant to be interactive, so please do submit questions. So you can use the information that you learned from all of these different predicate technologies to continue drafting your target product profile. So with the example of Alprolix, you can see that the efficacy, you can imagine that the efficacy data, because we're talking about the same indication and use, would be very similar. So you want to review the clinical trial data from the approval documentation. For the non-clinical toxicology study, we saw that there were 27 studies that were performed. And so you want to take a look at what those were and what species and what were the results of those to the extent that you can through the redacted materials, and start mapping out which studies will be appropriate for your technology. For the safety and side effects, now this is something that you can't predict with a truly novel therapy. However, you may be in the same sort of drug class as a current technology, so you might be able to start taking some rationally based guesses at what your safety and side effects might be. You similarly might be able to hypothesize about contraindications or drug interactions. And again, by reviewing the clinical trials data from your predicate technology, you may be able to begin mapping the size and duration of your clinical studies as you start doing that development work. So I'm not going to run through the second predicate because these are hypothetical in any case. So, but for each predicate that you identify, you want to do that same thing. You want to take a look at the approval documentation for that predicate attribute that applies to your technology. The aspect may be the indication, it may be the population, it may be the route of administration, or it could be that you're in the same sort of drug class or some other aspect. By referring to how similar technologies have been approved, you can really begin to flesh out your target product profile with the experiments, animal models, controls, possible safety signals to be aware of as you continue with your development work. There are going to be fields that you just can't fill in, and there will be fields where you need to review your assumptions, perhaps multiple times. But by taking this approach, you can effectively position yourself and your technology to have targeted conversations with your regulator, with potential investors, with potential strategic partners, with key opinion leaders. So for the purposes of today's event, I've not really fully expanded this template with all of the information that you would incorporate into a target product profile, and I've also only used 2 technologies as predicates. Don't feel in your own work that you should be limiting yourself in those ways. What you should be doing is you should be developing a clear understanding of all of your competing and correlative technologies and developing your project plan appropriately. And finally, not all of your regulatory research should focus on developing a target product profile. There's a lot more to know about the regulations, and so I want to just take a few minutes to show you some of the really great resources that FDA has put together to help you figure out some of the finer details of biomedical product development. So the FDA just recently created this all-in-one guidance document, guidance database. I love it. I mean, you can enter any search term and you'll get a return if FDA has issued a related guidance document from any of the centers. Some of the technologies are going to have their own development guidance document, such as blood storage bags. Others may only have a few related documents, but none that are really specific to your technology. So some of these examples might be biotechnology-derived drugs, which would apply to monoclonal antibodies, but might also be relevant to other cell-grown sort of therapies. And then, of course, there are always technologies or approaches that are so novel that there are no current guidance documents. And the key example, unfortunately, right now is nanotechnology therapeutic drugs. They fall into this category. There's no clear guidance on them. So you would put in nanotechnology, you might get something, but it wouldn't relate at all to therapeutic development. The draft guidance for the target product profile can be found right here from this page by entering the phrase target product into the search box. This type of search also works for many of the other non-specific product development activities that you're going to need to be aware of as you continue to develop your specific product. Things like meetings with sponsors, good manufacturing processes, informed consent forms, IRB interactions, all of those sorts of things. You just type in keywords to the guidance search database and whoop, there they are. It's great. Okay, so what else is there? There is a Learn series. Each center at the FDA has a series of web-based materials that they've conveniently gathered onto one website per center, and they call these their Learn series. These pages are a resource for innovators who are new to U.S. regulations, which could include folks who are developing their first biomedical technology or companies that are moving into the U.S. market from abroad. And even, experienced professionals will use these pages to learn about new areas or current topics. One example, sometimes the FDA will host a webinar about a recently released draft guidance as a way to let the community ask questions about FDA's intent. And this can really help industry decide what comments they want to submit to the FDA docket to have considered in the finalization of that guidance. Those types of webinars generally get posted after they're captioned, so within about a week of happening, they'll be posted onto a Learn page. Other types of information that you might find on these pages include webinars that have been specifically created for the Learn segment, or slide decks from public presentations, case studies, recordings of public meetings, and other material that FDA thinks might be useful to innovators as they're developing new technologies. These pages really are quite helpful to you as you develop an initial broad strokes understanding of how the FDA works and the path that your technology is about to take. However, all of this has been electronic, and if you remember just a few slides ago, I said talking to people is really important. And so the final FDA resource that I'd like you to be aware of is that each center has a small business office. The names of the offices vary throughout the FDA, but their role is to provide a single point of contact, a conduit for you, the new innovator, to ask some of your more basic questions. And then as your questions become more specific, to help guide you to the reviewers, or at least the review team, who might oversee your file once you submit it. To learn more about these offices and how to reach out with them, I want you to please go and check out our NHLBI Small Biz Hangout on making first contact with FDA. So at this time, I'm going to hand the webinar back to Gary, who's going to tell you a little bit about our office and the resources that NHLBI makes available to our biomedical innovators. While he's talking, please enter your final questions into the chat box, and I'll answer them in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So right now I guess we don't have any questions, but we still have a few more minutes, so feel free to submit something. So I just wanted to summarize the kind of work we do here at OTAC, the acronym for the Office of Translational Alliances and Coordination here at the NHLBI. Our focus is on transitioning products from the lab to the marketplace to improve public health, and the URL for our office is presented here on this slide. We have essentially 4 key areas that we focus on: the SBIR, STTR program, small business program. We have strategic initiatives that we fund and coordinate. We offer resources to the innovator community, and also are involved in connecting innovators with potential partners and investors. Under SBIR, we have, besides the omnibus solicitation, the investigator-initiated grants, we have targeted funding opportunities and our Phase 2B SBIR program. You can learn about that more at this URL. Our strategic initiatives include the NIH Centers for Accelerated Innovations and the Research Evaluation and Commercialization Hubs. The NCAI, or the first of the two, is an NHLBI focused program. The second is a trans NIH program. Both, however, are administered by the NHLBI. And these programs are designed to support the transition or acceleration of technologies out of the lab into proof of concept studies to make them potentially available for licensing or become the basis of developing a new company. On the resource side, both Chris and I and our colleague Gautam Prakash offer business, regulatory, and patent advice to applicants and awardees. We also involve industry partners in our programs in an advisory capacity. And our Hangouts, one of which we're wrapping up right now, are all archived on YouTube at the following URL. On the outreach side, we showcase, we actually sponsor select companies that we fund to attend partnering and investing conferences. In addition, we organize and run an innovation conference of our own, the NHLBI Innovation Conference, and our next one will be in Irvine, California in November, so stay tuned for announcements about that. And you can also learn more about those at the following URL. So going forward, please feel free to contact us with questions. You can email us at this NHLBI_SBIR email address. Please sign up for our listserv. The URL is at the bottom here. We also have a Twitter page and our website. So with that, I just want to provide the following
Actually, Gary?
Yes.
Gary, before we shut down for today, there are a few questions that have come in.
Okay.
And so one question is, will the slides be available after the webinar? And so the answer is that you can certainly request them. We are not necessarily posting the slide decks, but if you fill out the brief survey that I believe you will get at the end of this event and just provide us some feedback, you can request the slides through that or through the just through the email that Gary just posted. And another question was, how long do the redacted documents remain available online on the FDA website? And the answer to that is, I don't know that I've ever seen any taken down unless a product is withdrawn from market. So once the documents are redacted, they remain there, so you can certainly reach as far back as is appropriate to find information to support your technology development.
Okay, great. So with that, I just want to point out that these Hangouts are organized and presented by the Office of Translational Alliances and Coordination here at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And if you're developing a product or technology within our mission space, you can contact us through our website or through that email address there or phone number. However, if you're developing a product or technology that falls outside of our space, we encourage you to please reach out to the appropriate program official at the NIH, and you can find a list of contacts at the newly revamped NIH SBIR website. And thank you all very much for attending, and I hope you check in with us in the future. Bye.